Welcome today. We're so happy you're joining us. We have such a special program and such a special guest today. This is Dr. Paul Short, neuropsychologist, better known as the Parkinson coach, and he is going to share his wisdom and his expertise about Parkinson individuals, about interactions between care partners and individuals with Parkinson. And we're really, really excited to be piloting this program that will be an ongoing series where Paul comes into your homes and your businesses to help share his knowledge about this very important change in lots of things in the dynamics of a relationship. And I welcome you today.
Thank you, Debbie.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
I'd like to thank everyone for attending this webcast and hope that you're going to get a few tips that are going to be helpful for you in managing your life living with someone who has Parkinson's. I chose the title Pushing on a String because I like the imagery of trying to move a string by pushing it up from the bottom. What happens is the string bunches up and you run into resistance that you're going to have to push up against. The best way to move a string is to just pull on it. You're going to get the resistance anyway, but you're going to manage it more effectively. So I'd like to talk with you about some of the things that you may be running into at home. We're talking about the person who goes to physical therapy, for instance, makes great gains in physical therapy, moves well, gets everything down, comes home, does not practice, and after a short time becomes slow and the Parkinson's becomes prominent again. I'm talking about the person who goes to speech therapy, learns how to speak big and loud with the best of them, and then they don't rehearse. They come home and they sit, and in a few weeks you're leaning in going, I can't hear you, speak up. I'm talking about the person that stopped doing all the things that used to be fun for them, going out with friends, calling family, enjoying family, attending little parties for the family, working in the garden, doing things around the house, fishing, doing things that were so important to that person at an earlier time in their life. But for some of you, I'm also talking about the person who thinks that helping around the home means staying out of your way. So let's talk a little bit about these sorts of situations and these sorts of people. Because what I think you're probably thinking is it's the person and that Parkinson's has made them lazy. Okay, so what we're asking here is it the person or is it the Parkinson's disease? If it's the person, there may be some factors here that could be causing someone not to do the things that they used to do, to appear lazy. For instance, you could have a person who's depressed. Depression is very common with Parkinson's disease. In addition to having to deal with the difficult situation Parkinson's disease places a person in, Parkinson's and depression both share a common neurotransmitter, dopamine. And when there isn't as much dopamine, a person is more prone to becoming depressed because dopamine is important in our reward system. It tells us, that was good, let's do it again. So it rewards pleasurable activities. It may also be that a person has surrendered to the disease. They've begun to give up on themselves and because they believe the disease is winning and has taken away who they are and what they used to love to do. But it could also be something that in neurology is known as apathy. Apathy is a presentation state that comes from changes in the neurological makeup of the brain. It's primarily centered up here in the frontal lobes. There are some wires that go up and plug into the frontal lobes that are connected to the area where the Parkinson's is. And it can cause people to change. It's a permanent change in how the circuits in the brain function because of the changes with the dopamine. So it becomes part of who that person is. The person becomes apathetic, and this becomes the normal state for the person. So it's not a question of the person or Parkinson's, it's a question of the person with Parkinson's, the person and Parkinson's. Let's talk a little bit about apathy. Apathy is marked by almost everything that I mentioned earlier. First of all, the person loses their spontaneity. They don't do things very readily on their own. Something has to sort of prompt them to do it sometimes, an event, something that's going on in the house. They're very passive. They tend to just go along more frequently. They don't put up as much of a resistance when there's something that they don't want to do. There's reduced social interaction with friends and family, and this is one of the more frustrating things for folks who are dealing with a person with Parkinson's. You find a person who may have been very socially active early in their life now becomes a great deal less active, and they spend less time with friends and family. Finally, you'll find a person who's got reduced interest in all the things that used to be important to them. The things that used to make their life meaningful and enjoyable have now changed. And the most important thing is they quit doing pleasurable activities. They're less likely to do things that might actually make them feel better. So how are we typically dealing with apathy? When are we pushing on the string? Okay, well, you may call it persuasion, pushing, getting them to be motivated. They might be calling it this, nagging. You can only do so much pushing on a person before they do the one thing that they know is going to work against that. They become more inactive. They just resist very passively. It's almost as if they've read about Gandhi and decided to become passively resistant. You can try begging. This is effective every once in a while, but by and large, begging has about the same total outcome as nagging. It's not something that's going to work in the long run, and you're going to get very exhausted doing begging someone to do something all the time. You can blame them. You can tell them that the reason that they're so immobile, that they're having so much trouble with their Parkinson's disease, is because they're not doing anything, and it's all their fault. We might call that blaming the victim, because this is not something that a person does on their own. They would like to be able to do these things too, but honestly, they don't think to do them. This last one is my favorite because it's the one where I can do the greatest intervention. I can keep these homicidal thoughts that you're having from being a problem. We'll give you some ideas on how to help a person with Parkinson's do things so you're less likely to have fantasies of doing things you shouldn't do. All right, let's talk about pulling on a string. The first thing to remember is that you need to pick your battles. You're not going to be able to make somebody do something unless you have a reasonable good opportunity or chance of an outcome that you want. If you're trying to press every opportunity you can to get people to do things, you're going to get weary and they're going to get weary. Selecting the things that you're able to do and that the person with Parkinson's is likely to do is going to be very helpful for getting both of you to manage the disease more effectively. You can offload responsibility to the person with Parkinson's. One of the things that I've noticed in my clinical practice is so many people with Parkinson's disease would like to do more and probably would do more, but they have a very willing family member who will step in and do it for them. What happens eventually is a person gets used to having things done for them and will oblige you with no problem at all. So what we want to do is offload responsibility to the person with Parkinson's. Talk with them about things that they can do. Help them come up with ideas about how they can do things that are important to them. The most important thing is for you not to step in unless you're asked to step in. A person with Parkinson's begins to not tell you what they need because they figure either you're going to take care of it or there's not much reason to do so anyway. Finally, the most important thing a person living with a person with Parkinson's can do is learn how to say no. One of the things that I've also noticed in my clinical practice is it's very, very difficult for a lot of people to say no. They get used to saying yes, or they say, well, it's not the person's fault. They didn't deserve to have Parkinson's. They didn't want to have Parkinson's. But that doesn't mean that they won't make demands that can sometimes be quite excessive on you. You have to learn how to say no. This is also a portion of picking your battles, and it's the best way to pick a battle. Remember, when you're pulling the string, you cannot do it all. You need help from friends, family, support groups, and from organizations that deal with Parkinson's disease. I hope some of these tips are helpful for you, and they help you decide or discover some other things that might work for you.
Dr. Short, what an interesting presentation. Lots of information to think about and to put into action, and we're delighted to have you here. We're going to turn the show over now to the folks in our audience. We'd like you to touch base with the moderator. You can either type in your questions, you can call in the questions, and we'll be forwarding those right away to Dr. Short for his response. So thank you again.